The most dangerous question I ever asked was not about money, loyalty, or power. It was about a woman who walked into my office wearing a red dress. I had spent most of my life believing that control was the only language worth speaking. Men twice my age lowered their voices when I entered a room. Competitors changed their plans after hearing my name. Entire board meetings ended because I decided they were over. That was the world I understood. Predictable, disciplined, silent. Then Friday arrived, and everything I believed about myself began to fall apart at exactly 7:12 in the evening. Rain covered the windows of my office, blurring the lights of Manhattan until the city looked like a painting left out in the storm. The conference room outside had finally emptied after a 12-hour day, filled with negotiations, financial reports, and conversations nobody would remember by Monday morning. My executives gathered their files without speaking. My security team remained outside the glass walls, watching the hallway with the patience that came from years of experience. I stayed behind my desk with a black fountain pen balanced between my fingers, pretending to review tomorrow's schedule. The numbers on the page meant nothing. My attention had already drifted to the sound of heels crossing the marble floor. Claire Bennett stepped into my office carrying a leather folder against her chest. For 2 years, she had managed every impossible demand I placed on her without ever asking for recognition. She remembered birthdays I forgot, corrected mistakes before I noticed them, and somehow kept my life organized without making herself the center of it. She always dressed professionally, blending into the background the way exceptional assistants often did. That evening was different. She wore a deep red dress beneath a light cream-colored coat. It was elegant without trying to impress anyone. It was confident without asking for attention. Somehow that made it impossible for me to look away. She walked to my desk and opened the folder. "Your breakfast meeting with Senator Hayes has been moved to 8:30, she said. "The legal review begins at 10. The charity auction starts at 8 tonight, and Mr. Ethan Ward confirmed your invitation if you decide to attend." Ethan Ward. The name settled heavily inside my thoughts. I tightened my grip on the pen until the cap clicked beneath my thumb. Claire looked up immediately. She noticed details other people missed. That was one of the reasons I trusted her more than anyone else working in my building. "Is something wrong, Mr. Cole?" she asked. I should have answered no. I should have thanked her for staying late and wished her a pleasant evening. Instead, I heard myself ask the question before reason could stop me. "Who are you planning to kiss after work in that dress?" The office became completely still. Even the rain seemed quieter. Claire blinked once, then closed the folder with slow, deliberate care. She did not appear embarrassed. She did not appear frightened. She simply looked at me with calm disappointment. "That sounds like a personal question," she said. "It is. Then it deserves a personal answer." She slipped the folder onto my desk. "Someone who understands that my life does not belong to my employer." The words landed harder than any threat I had heard in years. She offered a polite smile, turned toward the door, and disappeared into the hallway without waiting for permission to leave. I watched the elevator doors close behind her reflection. For the first time in a very long time, my office felt too large. I reached for the folder she had left behind, intending to bury myself in tomorrow's schedule and forget the conversation had ever happened. Instead, I found a black envelope resting beneath the papers. There was no address, no signature, only a dark red seal pressed into the center. I broke it open and unfolded the single sheet inside. 6 words waited for me in neat block letters. "Your father did not die in an accident." The message remained in my hand long after the rain stopped sounding like rain. 6 words, simple enough for a child to read, heavy enough to pull every memory of my father back into the room. I read them again beneath the white light above my desk. "Your father did not die in an accident." My father had been declared dead 12 years earlier after his private plane disappeared over the Atlantic. No wreckage had ever been recovered. No witness had ever come forward. Only a government report and a closed case. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my inside pocket. Whoever had left that envelope understood exactly which question could make me abandon everything else. I pressed the button on my desk. "Marcus." Less than 30 seconds later, Marcus Reed entered without knocking. He had worked beside my family for almost 2 decades. Calm voice, perfect memory, impeccable timing. I had trusted him with matters I trusted to no one else. His eyes moved across my face before settling on the empty envelope. "Long day," he asked. "Find out who delivered this." I handed him the envelope, but kept the note. No cameras recorded the delivery? I have not checked yet. Then check. He nodded once. Does this concern Miss Bennet? The question caught my attention immediately. Why would you ask that? Because the envelope was beneath the folder she left behind. I studied him for a long moment. Marcus rarely guessed. He observed. That habit had made him invaluable. Quietly, I said, no one else needs to know. He left without another word. The office became silent again. I walked toward the glass wall overlooking Manhattan. Claire had already disappeared into the evening, but I could still picture her walking through the lobby in that red dress. For 2 years, she had never given me a reason to doubt her professionalism. Yet tonight she had looked different. Not because of the dress. Because there had been purpose behind every step she took after leaving my office. I returned to my desk and opened the executive calendar. Claire organized every appointment herself. She believed schedules revealed more about people than conversations ever could. At 8 o'clock, she had marked a personal event. Charity auction. Halston Museum. Guest confirmed by Ethan Ward. No additional notes. Ethan Ward was one of the most respected corporate attorneys in New York. He rarely attended charity events unless business waited behind the invitations. I opened the invitation record. Claire had accepted it 3 days earlier. That surprised me. She almost never mixed work with her private life. My phone vibrated. Marcus. No camera footage, he said. The envelope entered through internal mail. No sender. No delivery record. Impossible. Usually. I remained silent. There is something else, Marcus continued. I reviewed a few background files after you mentioned Miss Bennet. Go on. Her father was Robert Bennet, certified forensic accountant. He died 8 years ago while investigating financial irregularities connected to several corporations. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Which corporations? Marcus answered without hesitation. One of them was Cole Holdings. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Claire had never mentioned her father. Not once. She remembered every anniversary inside my company, every medication my mother needed, every preference I had never spoken aloud. Yet she had hidden the most important chapter of her own life. I picked up my coat. Prepare the car. You are attending the auction? Marcus asked. I was not invited because of charity. 10 minutes later, the city lights reflected across the wet streets as my car stopped outside the Halston Museum. Guests stepped beneath the stone entrance wrapped in expensive coats and quiet conversations. Then I saw Claire standing beneath the front columns. Ethan Ward greeted her with a respectful smile before placing a small antique brass key into her hand. She closed her fingers around it, looked toward the museum doors, and for the first time since I had met her, I realized my secretary had never come into my life by accident. I remained inside the car for exactly 12 seconds. That was how long it took me to understand I had already made the wrong decision. I had not come to the Halston Museum because of the anonymous message. I had not come because Robert Bennet once investigated Cole Holdings. I had come because Claire Bennet was standing beside another man, and for reasons I could no longer explain to myself, I needed to know why. The driver opened my door without being asked. Cool evening air carried the sound of distant traffic and quiet conversations drifting across the museum steps. Guests in formal clothing disappeared beneath warm lights, while photographers focused on donors whose names would fill tomorrow's society pages. Claire never noticed me approach. Ethan Ward spoke quietly while holding a slim leather document case beneath one arm. He pointed toward the museum entrance before saying something I could not hear. Claire nodded once and slipped the antique brass key into her handbag with deliberate care. That was not the behavior of someone attending a social event. That was preparation. Ethan saw me first. His polite smile faded into professional caution. Mr. Cole, he said, I did not expect to see you this evening. Neither did I. My eyes never left Claire. You accepted an invitation without telling me. Claire folded her hands calmly in front of her. It was a personal invitation, not a business meeting. Your calendar listed it. Because I manage your calendar honestly. Her answer landed with quiet precision. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. What is the key for? I asked. Ethan answered before Claire could. That is not my information to share. I looked at him. Then perhaps you should reconsider. Claire stepped slightly between us. No, he should not. There was no fear in her expression, only resolve. Before I could speak again, movement near the marble staircase caught my attention. Three men entered through separate doors within seconds of each other. None of them looked at the artwork displayed in the lobby. None of them greeted anyone. Instead, each chose a position with a clear view of Claire. Years of surviving by reading rooms before reading people made the pattern impossible to ignore. "Claire," I said quietly, "do not look behind you." She became still. "Why?" "Because someone is watching you." Ethan followed my line of sight. The color left his face almost immediately. "We need to move," he whispered. "Now." Claire looked from Ethan to me. "You knew this could happen?" "I knew someone else was searching for the archive," Ethan admitted. "I did not expect them tonight." "Archive," I repeated. Claire closed her eyes for one brief moment before opening them again. It was the look of someone realizing that a secret could no longer remain hidden. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "Eventually." Eventually is a dangerous word. One of the three men started walking toward us at an unhurried pace. I did not recognize him, but I recognized discipline. He moved like someone following instructions instead of curiosity. I made my decision before logic could argue with it. "Come with me." Claire did not move. "I cannot." "You can. If I leave now, I lose 8 years. The word stopped me. 8 years. The same number Marcus had given me only minutes earlier when he spoke about Robert Bennett. I lowered my voice until only she could hear it. "Tell me the truth." Claire looked directly into my eyes, and for the first time since she began working for me, every wall she had built disappeared. "I accepted the job in your office 2 years ago because I believed your family was responsible for my father's death," she said. "Everything I have done since then has been to find the evidence." The museum around us seemed to disappear. There was only Claire, the rain beginning again outside the glass doors, and the impossible distance that suddenly existed between us. "You came into my life to investigate me," I said. She nodded slowly. "Yes." Then she took one careful breath and whispered the sentence that changed everything. "I believe your family killed my father." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the museum faded into a distant murmur while Claire's confession settled between us like a truth that had been waiting years to be heard. I had negotiated billion-dollar agreements without hesitation. I had faced rivals who wanted everything my family had built. None of those moments had prepared me for the quiet certainty in Claire Bennett's eyes. She truly believed I had been part of destroying her family. I looked at Ethan. "Take us to the archive." He hesitated. "Damien, once that door is opened, there will be no pretending this is just another misunderstanding." I stopped pretending the moment she told me why she came into my life. Claire reached into her handbag and removed the antique brass key. She held it tightly, but did not move. "You still want to see the records?" she asked. "If they prove my family destroyed your father, I need to know. And if they prove you knew, then you should never forgive me." Something changed in her expression. The certainty remained, but the anger behind it became quieter. Ethan led us away from the crowded ballroom through a narrow service hallway that most guests never noticed. The polished marble gave way to concrete floors and soft white maintenance lights. The sounds of the auction disappeared behind heavy doors until only our footsteps remained. At the end of the corridor stood an old steel door marked Private Archive. Ethan nodded toward the lock. "Cabinet 14 is inside." Claire stepped forward and placed the brass key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood. Metal cabinets stretched across the walls beneath carefully controlled lighting. Ethan walked directly to the last row and stopped beside a black cabinet with a brass number plate. 14. Claire unlocked it slowly. Inside rested a leather ledger, 3 sealed document folders, and a small encrypted flash drive. She removed the top folder first. My name appeared immediately across the signature line. Damien Alexander Cole. Authorization for a $4 million transfer dated 8 years earlier. Claire looked at me without speaking. She did not need to. Every accusation she had carried for 2 years rested inside that single page. I took the document from her hands and examined it carefully. The signature looked perfect. Too perfect. "I did not sign this," I said quietly. Claire folded her arms. "It is your name." "Yes." "It is your company." "Yes." "Then explain it." I searched the lower corner of the document until I found the transaction date. The memory returned instantly. I was not in New York. Claire frowned. "What?" "My mother underwent emergency heart surgery in Boston that week. I stayed beside her for 3 days. Ethan looked at the date and immediately opened his tablet. After several seconds, he turned the screen toward Claire. Hospital visitor records, hotel receipts, security logs. Every document placed me more than 200 miles away when the transfer received approval from my office. Claire stared at the evidence in silence. Then who signed it? She whispered. Someone with access to my private authorization system. My phone vibrated before I could finish the sentence. Marcus Reed. I answered immediately. You found the archive faster than I expected, he said calmly. Every instinct I possessed turned cold. How do you know where I am? A quiet laugh came through the speaker. Because I needed Claire to bring you there. At that exact moment, the archive door locked automatically behind us with a heavy metallic click, and the lights dimmed until only the cabinet holding the evidence remained illuminated. The metallic click echoed through the archive long after the door finished locking. I lowered my phone slowly, listening to the silence Marcus had left behind. For years I had believed silence meant control. Tonight it sounded like a warning. Claire stood beside cabinet 14 with the transfer documents still in her hands, while Ethan looked toward the locked entrance and tested the handle once. It did not move. The security system has been overridden, he said quietly. Someone locked us in from the outside. I looked at the rows of cabinets stretching across the room. Every answer Claire had spent 8 years searching for was hidden somewhere among them. And somehow Marcus had known we would find this place. That realization disturbed me more than the locked door. It meant he had been several steps ahead of both of us from the beginning. Claire carefully placed the transfer document back into the folder and reached for the leather ledger beneath it. Dust rose into the controlled air as she opened the worn cover. Every page contained handwritten financial entries spanning more than a decade. Names, companies, dates, amounts. Most of them meant nothing until one entry stopped both of us. Robert Bennett. My eyes moved to the column beside his name. Status, internal audit completed. 2 days later, another entry appeared. Emergency executive authorization. For $1 million transferred under my forged signature. 3 days after that came the final note. Investigation closed. Claire stared at the page without speaking. My father found something, she whispered. Yes. He was trying to follow the money. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly before turning another page. Folded between the ledger sheets rested an old photograph protected inside a transparent sleeve. She removed it carefully. The picture showed my mother leaving a medical building in Boston 8 years earlier. I stood beside her holding the hospital door open. Several yards behind us, almost hidden among the people crossing the sidewalk, stood Marcus Reed. He was watching us. Claire turned the photograph over. 3 words had been written in faded blue ink across the back. Marcus knows everything. The handwriting belonged to my father. I recognized it instantly. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. That always happened when the truth became impossible to ignore. My father knew, I said quietly. At least he suspected. Claire looked at me with confusion replacing certainty. If he knew Marcus could not be trusted, why did he leave him beside you? Because my father disappeared before he could finish whatever he had started. Ethan examined the photograph closely. Someone placed this here intentionally. It was meant to be found. Before anyone could answer, my phone vibrated again. A text message appeared from Marcus. Do not waste time looking through every cabinet. You already have everything you need. Claire frowned. He wants us to stop searching, which means something more important is still here. We began opening the remaining folders one by one. Employment contracts, audit reports, internal correspondence. Most of it confirmed that Robert Bennett had questioned transactions linked to companies connected with Cole Holdings. Then Ethan discovered a sealed envelope hidden beneath the flash drive. He handed it to me without opening it. My father's handwriting covered the front. For Damien. Read only if I am gone. The room suddenly felt colder. I broke the seal with unsteady fingers and unfolded the single handwritten page inside. The first sentence erased every certainty I still possessed. If you are reading this, then the man standing closest to you has already betrayed our family. My father's letter trembled slightly in my hand, not because I was afraid, but because the foundation beneath every certainty I had ever trusted had begun to collapse. I continued reading while Claire and Ethan remained silent beside me. If you are reading this, then the man standing closest to you has already betrayed our family. Do not confuse loyalty with proximity. The most dangerous enemy is rarely the one outside the gates. He is the one who learns where you keep the keys. There was no signature beneath the final sentence. There did not need to be one. I knew my father's handwriting better than I knew my own. Claire watched my expression instead of the letter. "What else does it say?" she asked quietly. I folded the page and slipped it into my inside pocket. Enough to convince me that my father suspected Marcus long before he disappeared. Ethan looked toward the locked archive door once more. If Marcus knew this letter existed, why leave it here? Because he believed nobody would ever reach it. Claire lowered her eyes to the open cabinet. Or because he wanted us to find only part of the truth. Her words lingered in the still air. She had spent 2 years studying every detail inside my office. She understood something I had overlooked. Marcus never acted without layers. Every move pointed somewhere else. I stepped toward the archive door and pressed the emergency release panel. Nothing happened. The screen remained dark. My phone displayed no signal. The building that had seemed elegant only minutes earlier had become a sealed box. For the first time in years, my name carried no weight. My security team could not hear me. My influence could not unlock a single door. Claire removed the encrypted flash drive from the cabinet and slipped it into her handbag before walking toward a maintenance terminal mounted beside the climate controls. "Can you access it?" I asked. "I can try." "How?" She glanced at me with the smallest hint of a tired smile. "Managing executives teaches you more than calendars." She entered a maintenance password, but the screen rejected it. She paused, studied the error message, and selected another menu. "The event coordinator account is still active," she said. Marcus shut down outside communications, but he forgot the internal scheduling network. Ethan stepped beside her. "Can that help us?" "Maybe." Her fingers moved calmly across the keyboard. She opened the museum scheduling system and changed the location of one of tomorrow's private exhibitions 3 times in less than 30 seconds before restoring the original entry. Ethan frowned. "What did you just do?" "I created an anomaly that every administrator receives automatically. Someone in the operations office will investigate why the schedule changed repeatedly." I looked at her with genuine admiration. "You planned for problems before they happened. Working beside you taught me that every room needs another exit." Those words settled deeper than she realized. I had spent years believing I protected everyone around me. In truth, Claire had quietly learned how to protect herself because of the world I had built. The emergency lights flickered once, then twice. Footsteps echoed faintly beyond the archive wall. Ethan looked toward the corridor. "Someone is coming." Instinct pulled me one step in front of Claire before I even thought about it. She gently caught my sleeve. "Do not decide for me," she whispered. "Ask me." I looked into her eyes and understood the lesson she had been trying to teach me since the evening began. Control had never created trust. Respect did. I took a slow breath. "Claire, will you stand behind me until we know who is outside?" She held my gaze for several long seconds before answering. "Yes." The lock released with a heavy click. The archive door opened several inches, and a familiar voice drifted through the narrow gap. "Mr. Cole," Marcus said with perfect calm. "I was hoping you would finally read your father's letter." Marcus stood in the doorway with the same composed expression he had worn every morning for the past 10 years. His suit was perfectly pressed. His hands rested comfortably at his sides. There was no anger in his face. No urgency. That frightened me more than anything else could have. 2 museum security officers remained several feet behind him in the hallway, watching quietly without stepping inside. They looked toward Marcus before they looked toward me. In that single moment, I understood something I should have recognized years earlier. They were waiting for his instructions, not mine. "You always were an excellent student," Marcus said. "Your father hoped you would learn to question the people closest to you. Unfortunately, you learned too late." I stepped forward until only a few feet separated us. "You forged my signature." "Yes." "You framed Robert Bennett." He refused to stop asking questions. Claire stood beside me without saying a word. I could feel her breathing slow and steady behind my shoulder. Marcus looked at her with almost polite respect. "Your father was a remarkable accountant," he said. "He noticed patterns that should have remained invisible." Claire answered calmly. "You destroyed his reputation after he died." Reputations are easier to manage than living witnesses. Ethan tightened his grip on the document case, but he remained silent. Marcus continued speaking as though he were explaining a business presentation instead of dismantling the history of 2 families. "Your father trusted me," I said. "He trusted the position I held," Marcus corrected. Trust has never belonged to people. It belongs to appearances. He reached into his coat and removed a thin folder before placing it on a nearby table. Everything can still end quietly. The board believes you remain in control. The investigators know nothing. The documents inside Cabinet 14 disappear. Claire leaves New York with enough money to begin another life. Ethan returns to his law practice. Cole Holdings survives. Claire looked at me. She did not plead. She did not ask me to save her. She simply waited to discover which man I truly was. Marcus folded his hands behind his back. All you must do is sign one statement confirming that Claire Bennett entered the archive without authorization and manipulated financial records for personal revenge. The story is believable. She had motive. She had opportunity. Everyone walks away. I look toward Claire. 2 hours earlier, I would have believed Marcus without hesitation. 2 hours earlier, I would have protected my company first and searched for the truth afterward. That man no longer existed. No, I said. Marcus sighed quietly. Think carefully. I already have. I removed the encrypted flash drive from Claire's handbag only long enough to connect it to Ethan's secure document adapter. Ethan understood immediately. He copied every file onto his encrypted legal server without speaking. When the transfer finished, I placed the flash drive back into Claire's hand. Take it, I said. It belongs with the truth. Marcus watched the exchange without interrupting. You are willing to sacrifice everything your family built. If it was built on lies, then it was never worth protecting. Ethan closed his case. The files have been transmitted to an independent legal archive with automatic delivery instructions. Marcus lowered his eyes for the first time that evening. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. He had finally encountered something he could not control. He looked back at me with quiet disappointment. She will leave the moment she no longer needs you. I turned toward Claire instead of answering him. That has always been her choice. Claire held the flash drive against her heart and met my eyes with an expression I had never seen before. The suspicion was still there. The pain had not disappeared. But for the first time since she entered my office 2 years earlier, there was also the beginning of trust. 3 days passed before I saw Claire again. Those 72 hours felt longer than the previous 2 years combined. Federal investigators had received the records through Ethan's legal archive exactly as planned. The board of directors demanded emergency meetings. Reporters filled the sidewalk outside Cole Holdings before sunrise each morning. Every television screen in the building carried another headline about financial misconduct, missing records, and questions surrounding the company my family had spent decades building. I answered every question truthfully. I signed every authorization the investigators requested. For the first time in my professional life, protecting the truth mattered more than protecting my reputation. Claire did not return to work during those 3 days. Her office remained exactly as she had left it. A coffee mug rested beside a stack of color-coded folders. A small green plant leaned toward the window, waiting for someone who might never come back. On Monday afternoon, she finally entered the executive floor carrying a single cardboard box. She wore a navy business suit instead of the red dress that had changed everything. She smiled politely at the receptionist before walking toward my office with the same steady confidence she had always carried. She placed the box on the chair across from my desk and removed her employee identification badge. Human Resources asked me to return this, she said. I looked at the badge without touching it. You do not have to resign. Yes, she replied gently. I do. She began placing a few personal items into the box. A framed photograph of her father. A notebook filled with careful handwriting. The coffee mug she had used every morning for 2 years. Every object reminded me how much of her life had quietly existed just outside my office, while I believed I understood everything about her. I opened the top drawer of my desk and removed 2 sealed envelopes. The first contains a recommendation letter, I said. Every word is true. I placed it beside the box. The second contains information about a position at a respected law firm in Seattle. They are expanding their compliance department. They know your qualifications. They know everything that happened here. Claire looked at the envelopes, but did not reach for them. You plan my future again. No, I shook my head slowly. I prepared possibilities. The decision belongs entirely to you. She studied my face for a long moment. What if I decide to stay in New York? Then I hope this city treats you better than it has until now. And what if I decide never to see you again? The question deserved only one answer. Then I will respect that decision. Saying those words hurt more than admitting my company's failures. Yet they were also the most honest words I had spoken in years. Claire closed the cardboard box and lifted it into her arms. She walked toward the elevator without looking back. I remained where I stood. Every instinct urged me to stop her, to explain more, to ask her for another chance before the doors closed. I ignored every one of those instincts. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Claire stepped inside. The doors closed slowly between us. I watched the floor indicator begin its descent from 42 to 41. Then the numbers stopped moving. Several quiet seconds passed. The elevator remained suspended between two floors as though time itself had decided to wait. A moment later, the indicator changed direction. Instead of continuing downward, it began climbing back toward my office. I did not move from where I stood. I simply waited, wondering whether fate was giving me one final opportunity or preparing to teach me another lesson about letting go. The elevator doors opened, and Claire stepped out carrying the same cardboard box. She stood there quietly for several seconds before walking back toward my office. The afternoon sunlight had begun breaking through the clouds outside, covering the glass walls with pale reflections that made the city seem almost unfamiliar. I remained where I was. I had promised myself that if she returned, I would not decide her future for her again. Claire placed the box gently on the chair and looked around the office one last time. "I forgot something," she said. "What?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "The chance to tell you the truth before I leave." She rested one hand on the back of the chair. "I spent 2 years believing you were responsible for my father's death. Then I spent one night discovering I had blamed the wrong man. I cannot erase either of those years." I nodded slowly. "I would never ask you to." She looked down at the recommendation letter still resting unopened beside the box. When the elevator doors closed, I realized something. I was not leaving because I wanted a different future. I was leaving because I did not know whether I could trust this one. "That is fair, is it?" she asked softly. "Because you are no longer the same man who asked questions as though every answer already belonged to you." I looked out across Manhattan before answering. Neither is the woman who walked into my office hoping to prove I was guilty. For the first time since we met, we shared the same quiet understanding instead of the same suspicion. Claire picked up the recommendation letter and slipped it back across my desk. "I appreciate what you did. You do not have to stay because of gratitude. I know. You do not have to stay because you feel sorry for me. I know. You do not even have to stay because you believe we might have a future." She held my gaze without speaking. I took one slow breath. "If you leave today, I will still be grateful that you showed me the truth about myself." Claire walked toward the window until we stood side by side looking over the city. "My father used to tell me that power always reveals who a person really is." She turned toward me. "I think he was only half right." "What was the other half?" "Losing power reveals who someone chooses to become." 6 months later, Cole Holdings looked different from the company I had inherited. An independent board oversaw every major decision. Outside auditors reviewed every financial report. The organization was smaller, stronger, and finally worthy of the people who trusted it. Claire accepted a new position as chief of staff after refusing it twice. She negotiated every condition herself, including complete authority to challenge any decision that violated the standards we had promised to uphold. I signed the agreement without changing a single word. On a quiet Friday evening, after our final meeting ended, we stood alone in the same office where everything had begun. There were no secrets left between us, no investigations, no hidden motives. Only two people who had survived the truth together. Claire smiled when she noticed me looking at her. "You are thinking too much again." "Probably." I stepped closer but stopped before the distance disappeared. Once, I would have assumed the ending I wanted belonged to me. I understood better now. "May I kiss you?" I asked. Claire closed the final step herself. Her answer was gentle, unhurried, and entirely her own. In that quiet moment, I finally understood the lesson that had cost me almost everything. I had once believed the strongest man in the room was the one who could command every voice around him. I was wrong. The strongest man is the one who leaves the door open, accepts whatever answer comes next, and is grateful when love chooses to stay.